Hey guys, how's it going? It's Al. I am going to talk to you on this video about my optimal draft strategy for 2022 and how it's changed from previous years for this year specifically. If you guys have watched the videos that I've put out for the last 10 years or so, you know that I have a very specific style of drafting, and I'm comfortable drafting in all the different styles, whether it's going to be robust running back, zero running back, hero running back, bell cow and chill, however it is, late quarterback, early quarterback. I can draft any style based on what the room presents me, right? When the room zigs, you should be zagging. That's just the way that being a good player in poker or being a good fantasy drafter or being good at daily fantasy goes. But this year specifically, I feel like there is a different puzzle to be put together. And based on ADPs and based on the ways that people are drafting and possibly overshifting their strategies based on past years, but not this year's projections and player set, I think there's things that we can exploit that are out there. So I'm going to detail all of that for you. Thank you guys for being here. Drop a like on the video. Boop that snoot of the thumbs up button. I would appreciate it. Subscribe to the channel, ring the notifications bell, leave me a reply down below with how you like to draft this year. What is your favorite draft strategy if things shake out the way that you want them to? And let's go.
He's a legend.
So I'm over here on Underdog Fantasy taking a look at their ADPs as they are updated every single day with all the drafts that they have going, from best ball mania to puppy drafts to everything else, right? So these are the most accurate real money draft ADPs that you can get just based on volume and sharpness of drafters that exist on the site. And it leads me to a couple of different things that I need to talk about, points that we need to discuss, and the way that people used to draft. I mentioned some things in the intro. There are robust running back drafters, the high T drafters, if you will, that like to go 3-4 running backs in the first 4 rounds and lock up all those stud running backs. And then there's the zero running back drafters. The philosophy is that running back is such a fragile position that you can avoid that, right? And go with players that are less fragile, like wide receivers, pass catchers, load up on a ton of those early in the drafts, and then find running backs later that will give you enough points that you can stream. Now in best ball, that works, but it's a little more difficult, which has bred the hero running back strategy, which means taking one of the running backs that are in the top tier here in the first 1 to 2 rounds of the draft, usually spending a first round pick on a running back and then not drafting another one until much later. Now, because of the way that things have shifted over the last, over this year, based on the results from best ball mania tournaments, things have kind of shifted. And I think that they've overshifted to the point where we kind of have to get into certain specific things. Now, looking at the first 2 rounds, I'm going to bring up one of my draft boards here that we were kind of talking about on stream to give this a little bit of background and context. So the first 2 rounds, starting here, going through here, your first 5 picks in drafts this season, and this draft went a little bit different, obviously. And this is not to pick on this drafter right up here, but it's more along the lines that your top 5 this season are going to be more Jonathan Taylor in any particular order. Jonathan Taylor, Cooper Kupp, Christian McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, and Justin Jefferson. Those are, in my opinion, the top 5 players. I prefer to get, my favorite spot is anywhere in the top 5 to make sure that I get one of these 5. The next tier of players, Devontae Adams included in that tier, really brings us down the next like 10 picks. I don't think that you're wrong drafting Eckler, Diggs, Henry, Cook, Adams, Harris, Kelsey, Lamb, Mixon, Saquon, DeAndre, so whatever. They're all the same. Like all of these guys in here, there's no real separator from them, where this top 5 really does separate that second tier, starting with Austin Eckler, who had a fantastic year last year. But I believe he's going to see some sort of touchdown regression, most likely with the fact that he scored way too many receiving touchdowns from outside the 10-yard line. So very difficult for him to see some stickiness on his touchdown scoring from one year to the next. Hopefully his inside the 5 carries sustain, which would help him sustain a mid-teens, low to mid-teens touchdown rate this year, but 20 was a lot. So this top 5 is probably where you're going. I would personally like to be in the top 5 in drafts. Now, coming out of the first 2 rounds, in previous years, I've been a bell cow and chill drafter. I like to get in the first 2 rounds, 1 running back to hang my hat on, no matter which one it is of these guys, because as the saying goes, you can't really win your draft in the first round, but you sure can lose it. Now, most of the times that you lose it, it's not your fault. If you draft anybody in the first round at any position and they get injured, right? If you take one of the consensus top 12 picks in a 12-man draft and they step on someone's ankle, they blow out their knee, they get a concussion, they can't come back from it this year. Whatever the reason is, you have just wasted all that draft equity through no fault of your own. Every one of these players, if they play 17 games, is going to score way more points than everybody else that's out there on the list, or at least from a floor to ceiling perspective, has a much higher floor and equal ceiling to any other player on the board. That's why they're being drafted in the first round. So in previous years, getting that one bell cow guy and then not drafting another running back until like round 7, 8, 9 after the running back dead zone was the way that I went. But this year I'm advocating for something different. This year I believe that I want to have, and every draft that I've done, looking back at them, I like to kind of make sure that I have 2 running backs through the first 4 rounds. I believe that my drafts that I have taken a look at look better when I have 2 running backs through the first 4 rounds. Now, this draft, I was drafting out of the 12 spot. I did take Travis Kelce early, went with Joe Mixon in the second round, ended up with Ezekiel Elliott. Once I take Travis Kelce, I am way more likely to draft Patrick Mahomes. Obviously, this was an early draft, so in earlier drafts, quarterbacks go, the elite quarterbacks go a little bit earlier than do later. Right now, Patrick Mahomes' ADP is somewhere around like 53-ish in that range. So getting him around here probably would have been more optimal, but Ezekiel Elliott at 37, I knew that he was not going to come back to me at 60 to 61, so I made sure that I got my stack, which is a best ball specific style of drafting that, like, stacking and correlation in best ball tournaments is extremely potent because of the way that the season goes. Now, if you're playing sit and go drafts, one-off drafts, or drafting with your friends and family, it's not as important to double stack, correlate very, very heavily, right? What you want to do is draft for value. If I'm playing a sit and go league where it's a 17-week in best ball total points league, I'm not going to be focusing on getting double and triple stacks with my quarterbacks. The difference in the tournaments, if you're playing the puppy, the best ball mania, or any of the tournaments on DraftKings or Drafters or anywhere that you may be drafting for best ball tournaments, the first 14 weeks are total points, but then it goes to more of a daily fantasy standpoint for the playoff weeks, 15, 16, and 17. And that's where the correlation does pay off. And that's why in best ball drafts, we tend to correlate more specifically in tournaments. So I'm willing to reach in those situations. That is situational only for best ball, for if you're playing tournaments. Now, getting those 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds is different, like I said, for me in previous years. I like to just wait and take running backs later. But when everybody starts doing the thing, it no longer is a shortcut, and it's just the way. And if that's the way, when everybody else is now zigging, I have to find a way to zag. And the way that I've done that is to assure that I get those 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds because of the value that's been pushed down. Taking a look at the running backs, I don't think the dead zone starts in the 3rd round anymore. I think the dead zone starts like after round 4. Taking a look at these running backs that are going at the end of round 3 and into round 4. Let's isolate for running backs here. James Conner recently pushed into he's in the back end of the 3rd round. Travis Etienne around 35. I like him more on DraftKings than I like him on FanDuel. Also, we don't have data on him with Robinson. That's a whole other story. Ezekiel Elliott around 38. He had been as low as 52 at the beginning of draft season. Breece Hall at 42. Cam Akers at 46. J.K. Dobbins up to 55 from 65. There's a lot of players in those first 48 that are going to be the heavy dose guys on their team. And getting 2 of them, where these players last year or in previous years, 24 running backs were usually gone by the end of the 3rd round. Now they're spilling into the 4th round. And some of them into the 5th and 6th rounds, that there is more running back value out there in the middle of drafts. The next place that I like to kind of make sure that I go in drafts, and I'm not sure, well, I did do it in this draft, the elite tight ends. That is the next bullet point that I think is very important. The elite tight ends are very differentiated this year in this draft. I took Travis Kelce in the 1st round. The elite tight ends, in my opinion, exist through about the 5th round now, and the final one would be George Kittle on San Francisco. He went a little bit ahead of ADP in this draft. If we isolate for tight ends, Travis Kelce last year, 216 fantasy points. Mark Andrews, 247. Kyle Pitts, 142, scored absolutely no touchdowns. I think that we're going to see some positive regression for him. Well, not regression. I think that we're going to see some progression. Now, progression and regression are a different thing. You don't have to get into that topic right now. Progression meaning I think that he is going to advance as a player. Regression meaning his underlying statistics mean that his stats should be here versus there. They're two different things. Progression does not mean a player is getting better at regression. It just means that they're improving as a player, and tight ends do usually take longer. He had a fantastic rookie season. Even though he's on a bad team, I think that we're going to see good things from him, possibly 140 targets. Hopefully they line him up more against linebackers and safeties versus cornerbacks this season. I think the touchdowns should normalize to around 6 to 10 this season as opposed to 1 from last season. Darren Waller, 8.8 targets a game in all the games that he has played the last 3 seasons. Like he's going to be a monster again and isn't going to be the primary focus of defenses against him. And George Kittle with his 162 points, even though he was injured and missed a few games last year. There is a significant drop off from the production that these 5 tight ends can provide you to everyone else. Dalton Schultz, TJ Hawkinson, Dallas Goedert, Dawson Knox, who is the tight end 9 and scored way more touchdowns last year than he should have based on the volume that he got. It's going to be hard for him to sustain the 9 touchdown receptions that he got from last season on only 49 receptions. Hopefully something's going to change there, but always, the random tight end touchdown from Josh Allen. So all of these guys are dart throws from Schultz and Hawkinson less and Goddard less dart throwy, but the amount of points that you can get from these tight ends on a week in, week out basis, bankable, those top 5 elite tight ends, is way better than what you're going to get out of the last 2 seasons and this year included. The quote being, wow, tight end is deeper than it's ever been. Sure, but also no. I would much rather hang my hat on one of these guys as a standalone or a part of a stack in a best ball tournament than trying to force correlation around any of these other tight ends. Would be the way that I would be getting access to them, is usually through correlation. But as your number 1 tight end, it's much tougher to just say, okay, I'm going to make sure that I get 12 to 17 fantasy points a week, stacking guys from Dawson Knox down to Tunyon. They're going to have weeks where they're going to have a touchdown or possibly 2, but every one of these top 5 tight ends is probably going to be in your lineup every single week. My next bullet point is auction philosophy when it comes to drafting. So I used to be a big auction drafter instead of a snake drafter. I understand that that's not really viable when it comes to these large tournaments. $10 million to first on Underdog Fantasy. $10 million in prizes, $2 million to first, $1 million to second, another $1 million for whoever would. If you want to draft like that, you got to get scale, you got to get volume, and the only way they can do that is by having people draft snake drafts. It's just much quicker and more efficient. So the one thing that I've taken from auction drafting over to snake drafting is that in an auction draft, you either pay up for the players that you want and you overpay by a couple of a couple of dollars here, a couple of dollars there, or you save your money and you're going to be forced to overpay for the players that you didn't want. So once I got Kelsey and I wanted to lock in getting a couple of Chiefs on this stack, I was happy overpaying by a round to get Patrick Mahomes, knowing that I was not going to get him on the way back at 60 and 61. So overpaying for the guy that you want in a tournament specific draft. Now in sit and go leagues or in your friends and family league, value is king. And you can wait for the guys that you want in your snake drafts to kind of value hunt. There is great strategy for that. Mike Clay is an adopter of that strategy and wins fantasy leagues every single year. So do many fantasy drafters who draft based on I want the best value versus on ADP that fits into the philosophy of the team that I'm building. But for tournaments and best ball specifically, I am totally okay with reaching to get your stack if you know that that player is not going to be there on the way back. It's better to have the thing you want than to not get it and then have to reach and change strategies mid-draft. So I'm willing to pay up for players this year more often than the last few, for the players that I want based on where they go in those tournaments. Next philosophy that I think is extremely important this year versus the last few years, quarterbacks have massively separated themselves from what they were even 5 years ago. I don't have this on screen. I could pull it up if we need to. I can post it in Discord. If you're not a part of the Discord, definitely go check it out. Smizzle.tv/links has links to everything. My Instagram, my TikTok, our Discord. Once the season gets here, it'll have a link to my Best Buys article on ESPN. It'll have a link to the Listener League, which is going to be running again this year on DraftKings. All the links for everything are in one place right there on a perfect little link tree. So smizzle.tv/links will take you there. There are private rooms in the Discord if you're a channel member on YouTube or a Twitch subscriber. So make sure, again, that's the best value add that I offer, that I have on this channel. Become part of our community. It's over 5,500 people strong and growing every single week during NFL. What I was saying about quarterbacks is that the philosophy used to be you don't need to pay up at quarterback. The band of scoring at quarterback is extremely tight, and so therefore paying up for quarterback is silly because they're all kind of the same. And you can stream them if you're in a transaction league that has weekly waiver wire pickups. Streaming quarterbacks is a whole thing. JJ Zacharyason's built an entire career on that. And CD Carter, his lovely, lovely, lovely co-host, finds streamers for you every single week to plug in and play, which is great in a transaction league. In best ball leagues, it's a little bit different. You're locked into the guys that you have. And right now, the expectation of quarterbacks to account for 35 plus touchdowns is much greater than it was just 5 years ago. The game done changed. So waiting for players at quarterback before, when there were like 3 or 4 guys who would eclipse 30 touchdowns in a season, now there's like 12. Not even counting the players like Lamar Jackson, Hurts, Kyler, Trey Lance, who aren't going to throw for 30 to 35 touchdowns, but they're going to run the ball in a whole lot, between 5 and 12 touchdowns for each one of those individuals, which count for like 1.5 to 2 touchdowns based on the scoring in your league. So the elite quarterbacks are way more in play than they used to. I do not try to go nab 2 late round quarterbacks like I was doing 5-6 years ago in best ball, a strategy that was extremely powerful. Now, elite quarterbacks, you should build around. You should try to make sure that you get a stack built around one of these elite quarterbacks, because the amount of points that they can accrue, 417, 405, very predictably. Justin Herbert, 395, 342 as a rookie is absurd. Patrick Mahomes, 370, 380. When you scroll down to some of these other quarterbacks, Derek Carr, 271, 281 as the QB 13. Trevor Lawrence last year, 216. I expect growth from him, but like still. Matt Ryan, 293, 234. The gap between the elite quarterbacks and the secondary quarterbacks is greater than it was just 5 years ago. So nabbing one of those elite quarterbacks, if not an elite and then a borderline one like Russ Wilson, Dak Prescott, Matt Stafford, any of these guys in this range as a QB2 now, is so much more powerful on a week-to-week basis and on the season long. When you're playing total points leagues, and I know that my quarterback is going to average 5 or 6 more fantasy points per game than the quarterback that you're drafting, and my backup quarterback is going to average 3 more points per game than the secondary quarterback that you're drafting, making sure that you lock in an elite quarterback. And let's say I'm going to define elite quarterback by somebody that you can reasonably project as getting 35 plus, or the equivalent of, if they're a running quarterback on the list of 5 that I had mentioned, a combined touchdown passing number of 35 or greater. If you don't have that, you don't have anything. You have to nab one of those elite level, top-notch quarterbacks, because 35 plus is now the baseline, where 20 used to be the baseline. The ceiling is now 5,000 yards and 50 plus touchdowns, which happens every other season at this point. Aaron Rodgers, the last 2 seasons, has thrown 37 and 48 touchdowns for 336 and 387 points. People have dinged him a ton based on Devontae Adams leaving. He may not be able to replicate those numbers. Maybe he falls to 28 touchdown passes this year. Sure. But you know who's not going to fall from that? All these guys that are being drafted up here. So make sure that you nab yourself an elite quarterback. And finally, my goal coming through the first 10 rounds of a draft, I would like to, based on all of these rules that I've put together, first 10 rounds, I want to make sure that I have 1 quarterback, 3 wide receivers, unless we're 3 running backs, unless we're drafting on DraftKings, where I'm really only drafting 2 running backs in the first 10 rounds, because drafting half PPR and underdog is different from drafting full PPR with bonuses on DraftKings. 2 running backs is optimal in the first 2 rounds on DraftKings. 3 on underdog to me is optimal. 5 wide receivers and 1 tight end. With the previous rules that I said, 2 running backs in the first 4 rounds. I like nabbing one of the top 5 tight ends in that group as well, and make sure that I get one of the elite quarterbacks that have the possibility of 35 or more equivalent touchdowns, rushing or passing touchdowns combined. And those are the drafts that I've liked the best, and that is the style that I'm using for the rest of this season. Hope this video helped you. If it did, drop a like, subscribe to the channel. Let me know your draft strategy down below. Look out for another video right there.
He's a legend.